Hi everybody, thank you for watching this video. In this video, we will present about teaching speaking. First of all, we will introduce ourselves. Start by me. My name is Ketut Asta Denny Sadewi, and then my friends are Putu Yoni Serlina and Putri Laksmi Mira Ananta Socha. If you want to know more about how to teach speaking, you can watch this video until the end. Okay, without further ado, now let's start it. Teaching speaking. First of all, I want to ask about what is speaking. Speaking is the delivery of language through the mouth. To speak, we create sounds using many parts of our body, including the lungs, vocal tract, vocal cords, tongue, teeth, and lips. Speaking can be informal or formal. Informal speaking is typically used with family, friends, or people you know well. And then for formal speaking occurs in business, academic situations, and when meeting people for the first time. The mastery of speaking skills in English is a priority for many second or foreign language learners. Learners consequently often evaluate their success in language learning as well as the effectiveness of their English course on the basis of how well they feel they have improved in their spoken language proficiency. Jadi, berbicara adalah penyampaian bahasa melalui mulut. Untuk berbicara, kita membuat suara menggunakan banyak bagian di tubuh kita, termasuk paru-paru, saluran suara, pita suara, lidah, gigi, dan bibir. Berbicara bisa dalam konteks atau dalam cara informal atau formal. Bila berbicara informal, biasanya digunakan dengan keluarga, teman, atau orang yang kita kenal baik. Kemudian berbicara dalam secara formal biasanya digunakan dalam situasi bisnis atau akademis dan saat bertemu orang untuk pertama kalinya. Kemudian, penguasaan keterampilan berbicara dalam bahasa Inggris merupakan prioritas bagi banyak pelajar bahasa asing. Akibatnya, pelajar sering mengevaluasi keberhasilan mereka dalam pembelajaran bahasa serta keefektifan kursus bahasa Inggris mereka berdasarkan seberapa baik mereka merasa telah meningkat dalam kemampuan bahasa lisan mereka sendiri. Well, we move to styles of speaking. An important dimension of conversation is using a style of speaking that is appropriate to the particular circumstances. Different styles of speaking reflect the roles, age, sex, and status of participants in interactions and reflect the expression of politeness. Considering the various ways in which it is possible to ask someone the time and the different social meanings that are communicated by these differences. Jadi beberapa gaya berikut, gaya bicara seseorang tentang menanyakan waktu kepada seseorang. Berdasarkan perbedaan makna sosial antara lain, the first, got the time. The second, I guess it must be quite late now. The third one, what's the time? The fourth one, do you have the time? The fifth one, can I bother you for the time? The sixth one, you wouldn't have the time, would you? Well, lexical, phonological, and grammatical change may be involved in producing a suitable style of speaking, as the following alternatives illustrate. Jadi perubahan leksikal, fonologis, dan tata bahasa mungkin terlibat dalam menghasilkan gaya bicara yang sesuai, seperti yang diilustrasikan sebagai berikut. The first, have you seen the boss? You can change into have you seen the manager? It named as lexical. The second one, what you doing? You can change into what are you doing? It named as phonological. And the last, seen Joe lately? You can change into, have you seen Joe lately? It named as grammatical. Different speech styles reflect perceptions of the social roles of the participants in a speech event. If the speaker and hearer are judged to of more or less equal status, a casual speech style is appropriate that stresses affiliation and solidarity. if the participants are perceived as being of uneven power or status, a more formal speech style is appropriate, one that marks the dominance of one speaker over the other. Successful management of speech styles create the sense of politeness that is essential for harmonious social relations. Jadi gaya bicara yang berbeda mencerminkan persepsi tentang peran sosial para peserta dalam acara pidato. Jika pembicara dan pendengar dinilai dari status kualifikasi yang lebih atau kurang, gaya bicara casual cocok untuk menekankan afiliasi dan solidaritas. Jika partisipan dianggap memiliki kekuasaan atau status yang tidak seimbang, gaya bicara yang lebih formal cocok untuk menandai dominasi satu pembicara di atas yang lain. Manajemen gaya bicara yang sukses menciptakan rasa kesopanan yang penting untuk menghubungkan sosial yang harmonis. Well, we move to functions of speaking. Numerous attempts have been made to classify the functions of speaking in human interactions. Among them, namely, the first is talks as interaction, the second one is talks as transactions, and the third one is talks as performance.
I want to explain about talk as interactions, talk as transactions, talk as performance, and implications for teaching. The first one is talk as instructions. Mengacu pada apa yang biasanya kita maksud dengan percakapan dan menggambarkan interaksi dengan melayani fungsi sosial. Ketika orang bertemu, mereka bertukar salam, mengobrol, menceritakan pengalaman baru, dan sebagainya. Karena mereka ingin bersahabat dan membangun zona interaksi yang nyaman dengan orang lain. So, the focus is more on the speakers and how they wish to present themselves to each other than on the message. And then, such exchange may be either casual or more formal, depending on the circumstance, and their nature has been well described by Brown and W.E.L.D. in 1983. The main features of talk as interactions can be summarized as follows. The first one has a primarily social functions. Second one is reflects role relationships. Third one is reflects speaker's identity. The fourth is maybe a formal or casual. Fifth is uses conversational conventions. Sixth is reflects the degrees of politeness. Seventh is employs many generic words. Eighth is uses conversational register. And the last one is jointly constructed. Some of the skills involved using talk as interactions involve knowing how to do the following things. The first one is opening and closing conversations, and then choosing topics, and then making small talk, joking, recounting personal incidents and experience, turn-taking, using adjacency peers, interrupting, reacting to others, using an appropriate style of speaking. Okay. The mastering the art of talk as interactions is difficult and maybe not be a priority for all learners. However, students who do need such skills and find them lack report then they sometimes fail. Awkward and at a loss for words when they find themselves in a situation that requires talk for interaction. They feel difficulty in presenting a good image of themselves and sometimes avoid situations which call for this kind of talk. This can be disadvantage for some learners where your ability to use talk for conversations can be important. And then the second one is talk as transaction. So, jenis pembicaraan ini mengacu pada situasi di mana fokusnya adalah pada apa yang dikatakan atau dilakukan. Pesan adalah fokus utama di sini dan membuat diri sendiri dipahami dengan jelas dan akurat daripada peserta dan bagaimana mereka berinteraksi secara sosial satu sama lain. And then, example of this kinds of talk are, the first one is classroom group discussions and problem-solving activities. The second one is a class activities during which students design a poster. The third one is discussing needed repairs to a computer with a technician. The fourth is discussing sightseeing plans with a hotel clerk or tour guide. The fifth is making a telephone call to obtain flight information. The sixth is asking someone for directions on the street. And the seventh is buying something in the shop. And the last one is ordering food from a menu in a restaurant. Okay, parents distinguishes between two different types of talk as transactions. One is situation where the focus is on giving and receiving information and where the participant focus primarily on what is said or received. Accuracy may not be a priority as long as information is successfully communicated or understood. The second type are transactions which focus on obtaining goods or service, such as checking into a hotel or ordering food in a restaurant. The main features of talk as transactions are the first one, it has primarily information focus. The second one is the main focus is the message and not the participants. The third one is participants employ communication strategies to make themselves understood. The fourth is there may be frequent questions, repetitions, and comprehension checks as in the example from the classroom lessons above. The fifth is there may be negotiations and migrations. The sixth is linguistic accuracy is not always important. Some of the skills involved in using talk for transactions are explaining a need or intention, describing something, questioning, asking for clarifications, and then confirming information, justifying an opinion, making suggestions, clarifying understanding, and then making comparison, and the last one is agreeing and disagreeing. And then, so we'll move to talk as performance. Jenis pembicaraan ketiga yang dapat dibedakan dengan bermanfaat disebut pembicaraan sebagai pertunjukan. Hal ini mengacu pada bincang-bincang umum, yaitu bincang-bincang yang memberikan informasi kepada hadirin seperti ceramah pagi, pengumuman publik, dan pidato. Talk as performance tends to be in the forms of monologue rather than dialogue, often follows a recognizable format and it's closer to written language than conversational language. Similarly, it is often evaluated according to its effectiveness or impact on the listeners, something which is unlikely to happen with talk as interaction or transaction. Example of talk as performance are giving a class report about a school trip, conducting a class debate, giving a speech of welcome, making a sales presentation, and the last one is giving a lecture. The main features of talk as performance are: first one is there is a focus on both message and audience. Second one is it reflects predictable organizations and sequencing. The third one is form and accuracy is important. The fourth is language is more like written language. The last one is often monologic. Some of the skills involved in using talk as performance are using an appropriate format, presenting information is an appropriate sequence. The third is maintaining audience engagement, using correct pronunciations and grammar, creating an effect on the audience, using appropriate vocabulary, using appropriate opening and closing. Okay, the last material is implications for teaching. 3 masalah inti perlu ditangani dalam merencanakan kegiatan berbicara untuk kursus bahasa Inggris lisan. Yang pertama adalah menentukan jenis keterampilan berbicara, apa yang akan menjadi fokus kursus. The first is to determine what kinds of speaking skills the course will focus on. It is all 3 of the genres described above, or will some receive greater attention than others. Informal needs analysis is the starting point here. Procedures for determining needs include observations of learners carrying out different kinds of communicative tasks, questionnaires, interviews, and diagnostic testing. The second issue is identifying teaching strategies to teach its kind of talk.
Teaching talks as interaction. Talk as interaction is perhaps the most difficult skill to teach, since interactional talk is a very complex as well as subtle phenomena that takes place under the control of unspoken rules atau aturan tak tertulis. The rules for making small talk are such interactions are often initiated by a comment concerning something in the immediate vicinity or that both participants have knowledge of, and that the comment will elicit agreement, since agreement is face-preserving and non-threatening. Hence, safe topics must be chosen, such as weather, traffic, and so on. Aturan untuk membuat obrolan ringan adalah interaksi yang seringkali dimulai dengan komentar tentang sesuatu di sekitar atau yang diketahui oleh kedua belah pihak, dan bahwa hal tersebut akan mendapatkan persetujuan karena kesepakatan untuk menjaga image kita dan tidak mengancam bagi orang lain. Karenanya topik yang aman harus dipilih seperti cuaca, lalu lintas, dan sebagainya. Giving feedback or back channeling is another important aspect of talk as interaction and involves responding to a conversational partner with expressions such as, "That's interesting," "Yeah, really?" and so on, that indicate interest and a wish for the speaker to continue. Untuk berlatih menggunakan back channeling, siswa dapat memeriksa dialog di mana ada kalimat yang dihilangkan. Mereka dapat mempertimbangkan kalimat yang sesuai untuk mengisinya, kemudian mempraktikannya. The next is teaching talks as transaction. Talk as transaction is more easily planned, since current communicative materials are a rich resource of group activities, information gap activities, and role plays that can provide a source for practicing how to use talk for sharing and obtaining information, as well as for carrying out real-world transactions. Hal ini lebih mudah direncanakan karena materi komunikatif yang ada saat ini, karena banyak sekali contoh, informasi, dan peran yang dapat menjadi sumber untuk mempraktekkan bagaimana menggunakan pembicaraan untuk berbagi dan memperoleh informasi. Role-play activities are another familiar technique for practicing real-world transactions and typically involve the following sequence of activities. Number 1. Preparing. Reviewing vocabulary, real-world knowledge related to the content and context of the role play. For example, returning a faulty item to a store. Nomor 1 ada mempersiapkan, yaitu meninjau kosakata, pengetahuan dunia nyata terkait dengan konten dan konteks permainan peran. Misalnya mengembalikan item yang salah ke toko. Number 2. Modeling and eliciting. Demonstrating the stages that are typically involved in the transaction, eliciting suggestions for how each stage can be carried out, and teaching the functional language for each stage. Nomor 2, ada demonstrasi dan perolehan. Mendemonstrasikan tahapan yang biasanya terlibat dalam transaksi, mendapatkan saran bagaimana setiap tahapan dapat dilakukan, dan mengajarkan bahasa fungsional untuk setiap tahapan. Number 3, practicing and reviewing. Students are assigned roles and practice a role play using cue card or Realia to provide language and another support. Nomor 3, ada berlatih dan mereview. Siswa ditugaskan peran dan berlatih peran bermain menggunakan kartu petunjuk atau Realia untuk memberikan bahasa dan dukungan lainnya. The next part is teaching talks as performance. Teaching talk as performance requires a different teaching strategy. This involves providing examples or models of speeches, oral presentation, stories, and etc. through video or audio recordings and written examples. These are then analyzed or deconstructed in order to understand how such texts work and what their linguistic and other organizational features are. Sebagai pertunjukan, hal ini membutuhkan strategi pengajaran yang berbeda. Ini melibatkan pemberian contoh atau model pidato, presentasi secara lisan, cerita, dan lain-lain. Melalui contoh tertulis rekaman audio, video, dan lainnya. Kemudian dianalisis atau direkonstruksi untuk memahami bagaimana teks-teks semacam itu bekerja dan apa ciri linguistik dan organisasi lainnya. This approach involves, number 1, teaching explicitly about the structures and grammatical features of spoken and written text. Nomor 1, ada mengajar secara eksplisit tentang struktur dan fitur tata bahasa dari teks lisan dan tulis. Number 2, linking spoken and written text to the cultural context of their use. Nomor 2, ada menghubungkan teks lisan dan tertulis dengan konteks budaya yang digunakan. Number 3, designing units of work which focus on developing skills in relation to whole text. Nomor 3, ada merancang unit kerja yang berfokus pada pengembangan keterampilan yang berkaitan dengan keseluruhan teks. And number 4, providing students with guided practice as they develop language skills for meaningful communication through whole text. Nomor 4, ada memberi siswa praktek yang dibimbing saat mereka mengembangkan keterampilan bahasa untuk komunikasi yang bermakna. The last part, evaluating performance on speaking activities. The third issue involved in planning speaking activities is determining the expected level of performance on speaking tasks and the criteria that will be used to assess students' performance. Ketiga isu yang sudah kita bahas tadi terlibat dalam perencanaan kegiatan, menentukan tingkat yang diharapkan dari kinerja pada sebuah tugas dan kriteria yang akan digunakan untuk menilai kinerja siswa. A speaking activity that requires talk as performance, for example, a mini lecture, would require very different assessment criteria. This might include, number 1, clarity of presentation, for example, the extent to which the speaker organizes information in an easily comprehensible order. Nomor 1, ada kejelasan penyajian, yaitu sejauh mana pembicara mengatur informasi dalam urutan yang mudah dipahami. And the last, use of discourse markers, repetition, and stress to emphasize important points and to make the letter structure more salient to the listeners. Yang terakhir ada penggunaan tanda baca, pengulangan, dan penekanan untuk menekankan poin-poin penting dan untuk membuat struktur huruf lebih menonjol bagi pendengar. And that's all about our presentation, and thank you so much for watching. See you next week.